Elena, ¿cómo te ha ido?
Pues muy bien, gracias. Aquí un poco asustada por lo que pasó en Colorado. Muy
Ay,
triste,
Dios mío,
muy
me lo
triste.
dice, que eso es horrible, que son 6 días aparte de, eh, ¿cómo yo digo? 6 días aparte de,
Del otro atentado contra las
sí,
personas.
6 días aparte.
Murieron 18 personas en unos días, sin razón,
Ajá,
inocentes. Me da tanta pena.
sí, bueno, déjame no. Estoy tratando, porque no quiero que cuando estoy en pura eh, conferencia, que los muchachos de momento vengan gritando
Ay,
y se
sí,
oiga a través de
buena
la
idea.
computadora.
No te preocupes,
Entonces,
que Tony, no te preocupes. Si eso pasa, yo me encargo.
okay,
¿Ok?
okay. Well, I was trying to see if I get my Bluetooth earphones. I haven't learned how to connect it to this computer yet.
Yo te oigo perfectamente, Tony.
Sí, porque estoy usando la computadora.
Ah, es lo que estoy haciendo yo, estoy en la computadora.
Sí, estoy en la computadora, pero el sonido, ahorita lo tenía con los headphones, que cancela un poquito del sonido de afuera, pero se ve tan, se ve como de radio.
Ya. Qué importante, ¿eh?
Y la verdad que yo no tengo las orejas así de grande,
No, las tienes perfectas.
así que voy a ver, si hace mucho ruido, me la pongo, si no, estoy bien con el sonido de la computadora. Ok.
Alex, ¿cómo está tu mamá?
Gracias, Elenita, por siempre hacerle seguimiento. Bien, gracias a Dios. La hemos podido proteger durante esta pandemia bastante bien. Ella está en casa, no sé si te acuerdas,
Sí.
no está en un, ¿cómo se dice? Un sitio para
Nursing home.
Sí, no está en un sitio para los ancianos, pero sí está. Hemos tenido que coordinar, obviamente, muy cuidadosamente el equipo, porque ella ya no necesita, todavía no necesita de cuidado médico, pero ella ya en abril ahorita cumple 6 años de estar acompañada, de no estar sola ni un momentito, 24 horas al día. Y pues a través del tiempo, digo, hace 6 años, pues todavía podía bastante más, pero ahorita pues ya necesita ayuda al levantarse del sofá, ese tipo de apoyo, ¿no? Necesita ese tipo de cosas, pero sí, ¿cómo te diré? Sigue gozando, está muy olvidadiza y todo eso, y no sé, muchas veces no se acuerda que somos sus hijas, que yo soy la menor, que esta es la que vive al lado, esta es la que vive en Chicago, se acuerda de nosotros, pero se pierde a veces, pero sí, cuando ve a los niños, a los míos, por ejemplo, los goza, todavía goza mucho de la vida, así es que gracias a Dios estamos todavía en eso, que nos está tocando, que nos la están prestando otro ratito.
Claro que sí, pues le deseo mucha suerte y la recuerdo con mucho cariño. Ya te dije que ella fue mi profesora en San Luis University cuando estaba yo en el Master Program. Sí. Siempre tan dulce y cariñosa con todos. Os deseo lo mejor.
Gracias. Bueno, ¿y cómo está tu hijo, Elenita Tosesa?
Pues,
familia también.
Bueno, poco a poco va mejorando, pero el proceso es lento. Pero gracias por preguntar, ¿ok?
Sí. Mani Abarca, veo que estás aquí con nosotros. ¿Qué tal? A ver, tengo como 3 minutos para presentar a los 4. Bueno, el gobernador ya lo va a ver presentado un poco Tony, pero 3 minutos para ti, Denise Lieberman y Joseph Palm. Así es que necesito una frase para decirte. What do you want me to say about you in one sentence?
Glad to serve.
Glad to serve. All right. All right. Well, what is your exact title?
So I'm the treasurer of the Kansas City, Missouri School Board.
Treasurer, Kansas City School Board. Okay. And that is an elected position. And in your email, you said the elections were, had been going on these last couple of weeks. But when I looked you up on Ballotspedia, it said that your general election for April 6th had been canceled. So are you running for office, or are you already in, or what?
So yeah, it's probably referring to the fact that I have no opponent. So I am technically on the ballot, but it's by acclamation, because in the past, those who have made through the balloting process weren't even on a ballot. This year, we changed that practice so that if folks wanted to write in, they can. And so they put us on the ballot. So technically, I do have an election in April, but it's pretty much just to reaffirm what has already been done.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Hi, Mike Zambrana. Hi, Christy Sanchez. Just saying hi to everybody.
Hello.
Hola, Magnotti, ¿cómo está, Hilaria? Muy bien, muy bien. Bienvenidos a todos los que han entrado en los últimos minutos. Mike, bienvenidos. Cristi Sánchez, bienvenida. Y le voy a hacer una pregunta a Mike Zambrano. ¿Usted de dónde, qué ciudad está?
Oh, I'm currently in my office,
Okay, what city?
St. Louis.
You're in St. Louis, okay. I can hardly see that. Maybe it's my laptop. Okay.
How's your family?
You know, we're what we call a very concentrated family at home. You know, since COVID hit, we've been at home. And Rosa, you remember Rosa, she's immobile anymore.
Oh, no.
So we're kind of like 24/7 with her. And Maria and I take turns going in and out of the house. We can't be together a lot unless we find somebody to sit, you know. But we don't just go with anybody either, because we want to make sure that, you know, they either already been tested negative or they've already been vaccinated, and then they can sit with Rosa for a couple of hours while we go out together. But other than that, and that's even hard to find. We've only been able to do that once in the last 2 months. And I think Maria worked out something. In a couple of weeks, we'll be able to do that again for a couple hours.
So you and Maria have your vaccinations?
Oh yeah, yes, thank God.
Well, good. I got mine last week, and I was happy that my mother got hers just 2 days before I got mine. And I didn't want to get one before she did.
Good to have you. I'm back on mute.
Guillo. Guillo. Un placer verte como siempre. María Olivos, mucho gusto. María Yaxic.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Señor Rodríguez, un placer. Kevin Reyes, Ben Molina, Alex McCreary. There's somebody who says an iPhone. Who is that? Somebody that just says iPhone. Looks like Frank is connecting.
Okay, we're getting close to 3 p.m. We're going to start sharp at 3 p.m.
Sharp.
That's the sign of a good secretary.
Thank you. I learned it a little bit of somebody, from somebody. I'll be mute, but at 3 o'clock, I'm going to start sharing some housekeeping rules over here before I start this conference, okay?
Frank Caratero, congratulations. You're up for judge again. You made the panel again.
No, I haven't made the panel.
Oh, you haven't made the panel. Sorry.
I haven't made the panel.
I haven't looked at your email.
I haven't made the panel. I've applied. So I'm asking for everyone's support, writing a letter, email, making a call, whatever you can do.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's 3 o'clock sharp.
3 o'clock?
And we will start this event. So Tony is going to give the welcome, but before Tony gives the welcome, I just need to share with you some house rules. We ask you to mute yourselves all the time to help the panel discussions to go smoothly. And another thing that I will ask you is, if you have questions, put your questions on the chat. Your questions are going to be brought to the group after the panel is finished. And with that said, I will give the word to the president of the HLG, Antonio Maldonado. So Tony, it's all yours now.
Good afternoon, everybody. As chairman of the Hispanic Leaders Group, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 20th Annual Hispanic Capital Day. Obviously, we were not able to meet in the state capital, Jefferson City, this year. So with the help of Missouri's dedicated civil servants like Governor Parson, Chief Joseph Palm of the Office of Minority Health, and various state legislators, and the Hispanic Capital Day Committee, we are proud to bring you together so we can dialogue, create possibility for a better and more inclusive state of Missouri community. Also, I would be remiss if I don't give a big thank you to our event sponsor, Leuna Local 110, Eastern Missouri District, and the Kansas City St. Louis Carpenters Union. Our moderator for today will be Alejandra Johnson. Governor Mike Parson will be our first panelist to speak. Governor Parson was sworn in as the state's governor on June 1st, 2018, following Eric Greitens' resignation. He served the remainder of Greitens' term and was elected governor in his own right in 2020. The governor's first encounter with the Hispanic Leaders Group and its member was in June of 2018, just 5 days after being sworn in as governor, keeping his word that he gave us when he was a lieutenant governor, that he would come to St. Louis to meet our membership. And we were very grateful that he kept his word and showed that he's a man of integrity. So with that, please join me in welcoming Governor Mike Parsons.
Hey, Tony, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for being on this afternoon. And Tony didn't tell the rest of that story. I asked him when I showed up as governor if they were disappointed because the lieutenant governor didn't show up on that. But it was a great opportunity, and just always enjoyed it when you guys were at the Capitol. Everybody was at the Capitol, had a chance to visit with you and understand some of the issues facing. And I've never forgot those early meetings that I had trying to figure out when I became governor. Little did any of us know I was going to become governor. But the whole point is to try to figure out, how do I deliver on some of those things that you were concerned about and the things that were important to your community, along with many other people around the state. And now I'm in that position, so I have the opportunity to really do that. And one of the things that I thought early on, if I was in this position, what could I really do to change the needle in Missouri to people's lives? And I'll tell you what I focused everything on since I've been governor. Number one, workforce development. People have got to understand, one, you got to have an education, and two, you got to be trained for the workforce of tomorrow. And everybody has to be able to do that. Doesn't mean you got to go to college and go to 4-year degrees, but you have to have some concept of what the demands of the workforce out there, and you got to have that opportunity. The other thing that is so dearly important to me was early childhood development. I think if you really want to change society as a whole, it really starts with our kids and making sure they get a fundamental education of how they face tomorrow and how are they going to make sure that we get them the education they need and then get them into that workforce. So that's something I thought, if I could really get that right, I could change people's lives and give them an opportunity to a workforce and a job. And then the last thing was infrastructure. How do I make sure people can communicate? How do I make sure businesses will come here? They'll be looking for employees, they'll expand, and they'll bring their businesses here. And then how do we have a transportation system that supports businesses like St. Louis, like your communities? How do I do a better job at broadband to make sure everybody has the ability to have broadband services in the state? So literally, I made those things my priority. I really did, and I didn't go down very far from that. The reason I start this conversation off with that is because it was about those things that we done before a crisis, before a pandemic, and why we were somewhat be able to handle the storm we've been in for the last year here in this state. It's been incredibly hard for everyone, what we've been through. But if we had not had those basic things in place before the pandemic, we would be in much worse shape. And there's always questions, what do you do in the middle of a crisis? Believe me, in July, it seemed to me it was danged if I do and danged if I don't. Whatever decision I made, half the people were mad, half the people were happy, and you were just trying to really look out for what was best for the state of Missouri. Regardless what people thought back then, the end result's what I always look at and what's the best for my state. So I do want to share with you some positive things about it. As of just this week, we are the lowest state in the United States for the lowest positivity rate in COVID-19, the lowest in the United States right now, because of what actions we all took, not necessarily because government made us, but because of what you did and what I did, and says, hey, these are the things important if you want to protect yourself and your loved ones to do that. We're second in the United States of America for apprenticeship programs, which means we are really getting people involved in the workforce, teaching them what the skills they need to go into that workforce. We're in the top 10 of the United States for recovery right now. And something's important to you that's on here today. We're number 11 in site selection. And why do I say that's important? That means people are wanting to come to our state to open up businesses. They're wanting to put in distribution centers. They're wanting to put in IT systems. They're wanting to put in manufacturing jobs. All of those things relate to wherever you live in the state. Means there's opportunity there for us to try to do a better job of getting those jobs and getting that representation of all communities. And so I think that's important to realize. And then 70% of the jobs in this state, 72% of them, we have recovered from the pandemic. Let me talk about COVID-19 just briefly. It seems like I talk about it every day I have for a year, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I'll answer your questions to be more specific. All the controversy that seems to go around is saying, well, I don't do enough for one region of the state more than I do the other. let me tell you, there's one thing I will assure every one of you on this phone. Everybody's going to get treated equally in this state of Missouri, no matter where you're from, no matter what your background is, no matter where you live. You know, we're going to make sure we do that. The idea of the urban areas, St. Louis in particular, we're talking to a lot of you there today. It's just going to take, frankly, longer to go through that large population scale. But the vaccine itself, once we knew we'd get vaccine in, we could do a lot better job of really going out to different groups and different organizations to be able to do that. So I say that with one thing I want to tell you, especially if you leaders are on here. If you need help with the vaccine, I've called out the National Guard, you well know. But we have targeted teams in St. Louis and Kansas City. And these are basically 4-person teams. They do about 160 shots a day whenever they go in somewhere. If you need that assistance in your communities, you need to let me know. You need to let the governor's office know and make sure you reach out to me. And we will make sure you get some help up there if you need that in those areas, if you're struggling with that. But I will tell you, my priority will be the ones that are the most vulnerable, 65 years and older. That's still who we really got to make sure we get as many people there vaccinated as we can that want a vaccine. But things are looking better every day on the vaccine front. So I think by the end of April, you'll see the state even become much more open. That's not now. So that's a pretty quick rundown of everything that I know in a quick version to tell you. The one thing I just always want to tell you before I get off here, haven't been able to see a lot of people in a year just like you haven't. We're doing this virtual. I definitely look forward to the day when I can come out and see you all face to face and be able to tell you how much I appreciate your friendship and your support since I was lieutenant governor and now as governor. And I truly want to figure out what it is I can do to help you, because at the end of the day, it's about the next generations for me. It's not about me so much anymore, but I want to make sure people have the same opportunities I've had and that you've had to be successful and why you're on here today. So with that, let me turn it back over to you, Tony, and I'm open for questions if you want to ask a few. If they're easy questions, I am.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over. Governor Parson, thank you so much for that. I'm going to turn it over to Alejandra, who is the moderator. And if I personally have any question, I will also use the chat.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Governor Parsons, for your words. And you know, I've pulled you over to the side when we are in your office the last time, and you know, I asked very direct questions, and I'm going to kick off the question answers. We do have several in the chat, and we'll get to those. You know, I know that I cannot imagine. I can't say I know because I'm nothing. My positions of responsibility are nothing like yours. But I do have a question about that vaccine distribution in terms specifically of what we're seeing in the news from various reputable sources, vaccines in excess amounts going to smaller communities that don't need them, and then because of the nature of the science of the vaccine, that they've gotten wasted. And you know, I do think that equity and equality are different concepts that we could discuss at a different time. But even if we don't focus on equity right now, the larger population of the urban areas and so forth, there's some questions there. But I think specifically to have even a single shot be wasted seems like a shame under these current circumstances when you have people, you know, that want them, right? Desperately want them. So if you wouldn't mind speaking to that, if you could.
I would be glad to. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. First of all, for whatever reason, the media has tried to make this just a doomsday scenario in all angles. The plan we had in place was to make sure the distribution levels in rural Missouri and urban area are the same. We knew that eventually when we first went out with that plan, and this is a plan we had in October, it hasn't changed any, that when you went to the rural areas, when you first put that distribution out, they would soon be done just because of the sheer magnitude, because of a county of 30,000 versus the city of St. Louis or Kansas City. So all those people we knew would get a first shot, first chance like most people. Then we could put our resources in the urban areas, which is exactly what we are doing to be able to do that. The waste factor you hear when the media come out and says, well, they wasted, they only did 1,000, they had 2,000, stuff like that. Here's the facts. All we did is move those vaccines, those doses to another facility, another site, whether it's a healthcare, whether it's a pharmacy, whether it's a hospital. Over 200 million doses we've administered. The loss in 200 million has been 400 doses is what the loss has been. And that's either a vial got dropped or somebody did have 10 shots left over, something like that. But if you think about it, over 2 million vaccinations that we've done in the state, there's been 400 that we've lost out of 2 million. That's the truth of what we're happening. And all the twist about, the governor tries to help rural Missouri more than he does urban areas. That's not true at all. Look, I love the people of this state and I love this state. And I don't care where you live. We're all in here together to try to do best can. And I'm going to continue to do that. When we do mass vaccines, everybody started saying, I'm having a max vaccine of 1,000 or 2,000. Our whole image of a max vaccine when I called out the National Guard is like we did at Arrowhead Stadium last weekend, where we did 8,000 in 2 days. It's the same thing we'll be bringing to St. Louis this week when we go to a lot of the different sites up there. When we leave St. Louis next week, now I'm pretty sure I'm right on this number, but we'll do 17,000 shots in the St. Louis area this coming week. And it's simply because we got more vaccine and we got more resources that I can take the National Guard to put there. So we're getting there. It's not as quick as everybody wants it. And I realize that, but I guarantee you it's going to be done fairly to everybody in this state. That's what I got to do as governor. I can't pick and choose. I try not to pick and choose any kind of winners or losers and things like this, because again, every part of the state's important to me, and I'm going to do my best to make sure I'm fair about that.
I appreciate you being here, Governor. I think we all do. We do have language questions coming up in the chat. What is the state's commitment to English plus COVID information strategies? Will there be funding for interpretation services? The HLG and other volunteers, and I'm one of them, one of the issues we have is language access. And Governor, I'm an attorney. I have a master's in international business. I speak 4 languages, and I'm going to tell you that sometimes these questionnaires on COVID, I'm talking to my husband, I'm like, is this what they mean? Like, I want to answer honestly. I'm not trying to jump the line. So when you have language issues that are an additional barrier, I just can't imagine if I'm struggling, like how you could possibly navigate that. So this is a very, very real need to have interpretation and language support. I also see, it comes under the Civil Rights Act and so forth with a longer question there in the chat. Could you speak to your language commitment, please?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question we struggled on that. And first of all, let me just compliment you with that background of all the knowledge. Yeah, you're a lot smarter than I am. I can tell you that right now. Let me just say that right off the bat. But let me tell you.
You can hire me, Governor. You can hire me. That's good.
One of the things we found out early on during the pandemic, and I tell you where it really showed up. It showed up at a processing plant up around St. Joe early on. There was probably 8 different languages that where employees were teaching there. And that became problematic for us, trying to get a simple message out when you had to do that in multiple languages and things, and really opened us up to realize, hey, we have to do a better job than that to get that language barrier out. So one thing I would ask you, when you see those things where you say, hey, this is pretty difficult for us to understand or for us to be able to comprehend what it is you're wanting us to do, I just would appreciate if you'd make sure and give me that information. We want to fix those things. And here's the thing for everybody that's listening in today. And you're not going to hear, well, I'm a conservative at heart, to say the least, but there's a lot of money out here right now to fix these exact problems. We just got to have the organization and the infrastructure in place to fix it. Because I just had a meeting on daycare, for example, that's getting a little off subject what you just talked to me about, but daycare services for any community in this state, we want to be able to help with that, no matter where you live, how you live. But I need to make sure you get in touch with us and tell us what those needs are, so we got the opportunity to fix it. So the same thing with the language. I would just say that if you know things we can do better, let me know. But we are aware that that was a problem, and we're saying, how do we get this where everybody can understand? You know what? One of the things during that time, trying to just encourage people to wear a mask, social distancing, wash your hands, become very problematic because people didn't understand what it is you wanted. And that just seemed to make situations worse. And then there was more confusing because you had different languages trying to explain to other people, and it just became worse. So point well taken. We'll do whatever we can to help you with that.
Yeah, and we have right here in the chat actually a great suggestion for mass vaccination clinics done in small counties where there's specifically large populations. Like Monticello has a big Hispanic community working for the meat factories like Cargill. So that would be great. So to fin, just so we'll, you know what, Governor, last time we gave you a letter, we'll prepare you a letter from everybody on this call, and with a list. I like lists. Lists are good. You can check them off. So moving though to language, how can school, or continuing, but moving away from vaccines, how can schools be supported to take advantage of language grants or others, e.g. the World Language Advancement and Readiness Act, to support students learning other languages? Really foreign languages. And Governor, you may or may not be aware of this, but when you have certain percentages, then ballots have to be translated and so forth. There's some federal protections there for languages. But when you're kind of a growing community and you haven't quite met those federal thresholds yet, there's still a lot of need for language really across the board for any service and for anything. And here we have some people focusing on education and language as well. Could you speak to that? Would you mind, sir?
Well, let me ask you, is that from that level? I'm not aware on the federal level of what you were just talking on the percentages, but is that the schools that are not making that available? Is that through instructions? Is that through the financial side of it, or do you know on that?
Haiti, can I ask you to unmute yourself and elaborate a little bit on this question? It's specifically for language grants.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Governor Parson. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Yes, in relation to that question, is that there is a concern because there are several schools that are closing the language programs. So I believe that it's just great to know, to have this support from your office in the part of informing schools of opportunities of grants, like the one that I posted there, which is the WLARA, which is the World Language Advancement and Readiness Act. I know it's focused on military schools that have a junior ROT program, but I know that also there is another one that's going to be included, which is the BEST Act, related to the seal of biliteracy. I believe that our state will benefit so much of having a bilingual workforce, and I believe that our schools need that support on that part. I believe that we are able just to work on that aspect, as you were mentioning, that one of the important things that you have in your plan for our community's education. And I believe having a group of students who are bilingual, who can speak different languages, will help us a lot with that attraction that you're telling us that you have in plan.
Yes, and to clarify that point, because I asked it a little bit maybe in a confused way, Title VI, according to Mr. Valadez, says all state agencies that receive federal funding are required to have language access plans under Title VI. The same is true for hospitals, FQHCs, which I'm sorry, I don't even know what that is, departments of public health, etc. So you might know what that is, Governor. That's the language access plan.
Federal Quality Healthcare Center. They're down there in your neighborhood. So they're a good thing, helping a lot of people in a lot of areas that need it. Well, let me tell you this, if you will, and Tony or some of you can reach out to my office, if you would just send me an email to the governor's office, and I'm sure you all have that somewhere you can get it. Just tell me what you just told me there on the Title VI and all that information. Let me check into it and let me get back with you so I give you a real good answer of where we're at on that or why we're not. I would assume if that's a federal requirement, I'd be surprised that we're not doing it. If we're not, I don't understand why we're not. So let me check into that with my education side of it. But look, if this crisis hadn't exposed anything, that language barrier is real out there, which you know that But I mean, for our side, our departments, our directors, we come face to face with that. And it's unfortunate it had to happen during a crisis, but I think we want to make sure and correct that problem. So we'll be glad to look into that. But if you'll send me that, send me your name and number, I will get back with you and let you know what I find out on that.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you. And that follow-up, thank you, Haiti. So to transition now, we have a great question. You may be aware, Governor, there's a conversation internally that's going on in our community, whether you identify as Latino, Hispanic, Latina, Latinx. I personally, although I'm cishet, identify as Latinx because of the discrimination that we have, the internal conversation that we have, and of course external with regard to LGBTQIA+ members of our community. So that intersection there of being Latino and also LGBTQIA+. So one of the questions is, Missouri is one of the lead states in the country with regards to the number of anti-LGBTQ bills introduced, particularly trans people of color. And what are you doing and what will you do to ensure everyone is treated equally? I was raised with a Jesus that didn't draw too many lines. So my Christianity comes from a love everyone type. I don't turn the other cheek often enough, but I do try to be inclusive. So could you speak to that, sir? Thanks.
Yeah, let me just be frank about it. Some of this is in my own family, so I want to be open about that too with some of my my own relatives, that we all deal with some of these situations sometimes. You know, one is a Christian believer. You know, there's always challenging times for that on personally, for me and my convictions. But let me just tell you this right now, and I'm going to go back to my own family members as a perfect example. You know, they're my family. I love them. You know, and because they don't live a lifestyle that I necessarily agree with, that doesn't mean I can be prejudiced against them. That doesn't mean I can do things that are put them in a different class than someone else. They still have the equal rights to everyone else just because we don't agree on the same issue. I remember one time in the Senate when I was in there, they had an issue down there about, you know, the issues of whether you would fire somebody if you found out that they were had a relationship with another partner, you know. And to my first thought, me as a former sheriff and as a business owner, I would never do that. If I had a good employee and they did a good job, and the scenario was, if you found out about it, what would you do then? You know, look, that's not my place to make a judgment on everybody's life. You know, I have my own convictions, my own belief, and I stand by them. You know, I've been blessed in my career to be able to do things I do, and I'll still do that. That doesn't mean I'm prejudiced against anybody, that I'm going to discriminate against anybody because they don't think like I think. That's what makes it so special in this country about how we deal with things. But, you know, I think on a personal level, we all try to figure out, you know, what's the best way to move forward. And for myself, I had to go through that too.
Well, and I think, Governor, this is something that several of us, I believe, have observed, and I don't mean to put you in a hot spot. I know that you're used to it, but with regard to your party, because I do hear sometimes differences, shall we say, in your approach versus maybe some of the legislators' approach, to put it, you know, kind of as gently as I can, so that were you in charge of all of the laws being written in Missouri, maybe not all of the laws would be the same. We'll just put it that way, right? But in your official capacity as governor, you know, this commitment and vow that you have to support the Hispanic community, and dovetailing with that LGBTQI+ that we were just talking about, you know, how can we you know, get what you're saying here to us now, you know, from my personal level, my family members, I love them all. And how do we genuinely, because I mean, to that point, you know, the NAACP has a travel advisory out in Missouri that's still active. And although some of us are lighter skinned and may not encounter that kind of racism, in terms of literally like anti-racist measures, what can we count on your office to do? Because some of, you know, I'm former president of the Hispanic Bar Association, I believe you may recall that. And some of my members of my organization are darker skinned and affected by some of the racism that we see here in in Missouri. I mean, the whole nation, but I'm talking to the governor of Missouri. So can you speak to your official capacity for LGBTQIA plus and all of the Hispanic community, please?
Well, I think number one, I hope I'm a guy that believes in action. So hopefully over the years that you get to know me a little better, and I've been to those communities, I've reached out to early on. I've been to the African American community, probably in the St. Louis region, more than any governor probably has, and I don't know when. And it's simply because I want to try to figure out how can I do a better job as governor? How can I take care of the people of this state, regardless, again, wherever the situation they're in. You know, you can have this discussion so many different ways in today's world, as I see it on TV anymore, and I see the different things, whether it's boys and girls, and are we both the same? Are we not both the same? And I think those arguments will continue and those discussions will continue to go on. I don't know that I'm going to change that or anybody else for a little bit, but I can change how I conduct myself as the governor of the state of Missouri. And I can do things about respecting one another for wherever you are, for whatever you believe in. Like I said, you'll never hear me change my tone much on what I just said to you today. And that's why I believe everybody has a place in Missouri. And again, I go back to why I love this state so much, and I love the people of this state. You know, it's going to be a challenging time for a while. You see that. I can't sugarcoat that not everybody agrees like I do. And my own party doesn't agree like I agree. But I think there is a balance to be done, and I think people should be respected for who they are. You know, probably not the best answer. You probably some people out there say, well, I wish you'd be a little stronger on this, or what did you mean by that? I'm just trying to be as honest with you as I can about who I am and what I believe and how I conduct myself as governor. And hopefully it's with everybody in the state of Missouri in mind that I try to do a balanced approach.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I see that it looks to me like I've moved through all of the questions here. I do want to just tell you, Governor, I'm not sure that I'm supposed to do this. So if it is disallowed, please disregard it, just like you tell a jury and the judge might instruct them. But I do want to bring to your attention, it's a pet thing of mine as the president or immediate past president of the Hispanic Bar Association. We've never had a local judge. I do believe that representation on the bench is a little bit lacking. And on this call, I believe he better not have gotten off. We have Frank Caratero. He is applying. Obviously, you will have many qualified candidates, and I'm not advocating for myself, but I do want you to know that we have a Hispanic leader here on the call with us who has put in his application for the St. Louis City Court, and I hope that you will give due consideration to the fact that he's active in the community when selecting among them. I've seen the names. You've got a lot of qualified candidates that are going to make it to the panel. And then if Mr. Caratero makes it to the panel, I'd like to bring that to your attention. So Tony, do we have anything else, or can we thank the governor for his kind sharing of time?
Yes, I want to express my thanks to the governor for taking the time from your busy schedule to be with us again this year. And know that, Alejandra, what I want is all the questions that have not been answered on the chat. We have a recording of this. I would like to compile those questions, and if, you know, so that they don't duplicate each other, right? The same question by different people, compile those. And like Governor Parson had invited me to send him an email with questions that he can take time to look at, analyze, and then answer truthfully to us. That would be a great thing, because I know we can get to talking and we can go on for hours. And with respect to the governor's time and respect to the time of the additional panelists, I'd like to see, Alejandra, if we can move on.
Yeah, I just want to close out a couple of, thank you. We've got.
Muchas gracias, señor gobernador.
Thank you.
Yes,
thank you
everybody wave like this as a thank you. That way you don't have to unmute.
Right, thank you. Yeah, that diversity in the appointments.
Let's acknowledge the governor. Thank you.
The diversity in the appointments for state boards and commissions came up, and gun expansion came up. But if the governor would like to close out on that, or has he left?
Yep. Let me finish with one question that's really pretty dear to me is when you talk about appointments. You talk specifically about the bench, but there's many more appointments besides the bench. I know that's the one that kind of highlights some of the areas, but fortunately or unfortunately, there's 1,400 different committees and commissions out there. So a lot of them are mainly namesake only, but there's a lot of them that are not. A lot of them has to do with economic development. A lot of them has to do with probation and parole. There's education, there's healthcare, all kinds of things. You really need to take a good look at that sometimes and make sure we get good applicants. We're always looking to see how we can be more diverse in those boards and commissions. One of the things I'm very proud of, and with my own cabinet member, of the people I have in my own cabinet, you know, the 16 directors, 10 of them are women in my cabinet. You know, of course, I got a wife and I got three granddaughters and a daughter. So I'm pretty used to being told what to do a lot of times. So I guess by putting them in the positions they are, but they're extremely talented, extremely qualified. And so we're always looking for different kinds of people to put in those positions. So we would love to have more representation from your community to get in some of those positions. But I would suggest look online, look at those. I have a guy here in the office that does nothing but this all day long. I'd be glad to put you in touch with him. So when you do have candidates that have interest in different things, we would really appreciate it. Make sure you get somebody on the economic development side, because that really goes to the jobs and the businesses in your communities. And we'd love to have somebody there. So take advantage of that.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, sir. We appreciate it very much.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for having me on. Good to see everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you, folks. All right. So we had that, I think, a good, productive discussion, a good start to our first session here. We may go over a little bit in time, which we anticipated. And Haiti, I see that you asked for a contact name and a direct email. We do have good contact information for this. Jeff, I'm sorry, I just saw your question about the African immigrant community in St. Louis. But we'll definitely, we'll put that in the letter, the report that we're going to prepare for all of this for the governor. So let's move on to our other fantastic speakers that we have on the panel. We had only gotten an allocated time for the governor, so we had to kind of put him up at the front, but we have a great group of speakers to talk to you now. And do I still see like a connection here for Governor Parson? Maybe Mauricio, can you look into that? And because it's coming up like a black screen on mine. So I want to make sure that the other panelists can be seen. I'll start introducing them though. We have Manny Abarca IV, who is the treasurer for the Kansas City School Board at this time. I only have a brief amount of time, but a great individual to keep track of, and we'll talk to him in a second. Denise Lieberman, Director and General Counsel of the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition. Oh my gosh, Denise, we could have had you on just to cross-examine the governor solely on voter issues, right? That would have been fantastic. But in the interest of time. And did Joe Palm make it onto this call, Tony? Because I have not seen Joe, but
I have not seen Joe, so let's just,
rolling. Okay, well that is totally okay, because Manny and Denise are great speakers. So I want to ask you guys to give very briefly, just 3 to 5 minutes, a kind of overview of who you are, the host can log the governor off if that's an issue. Yes, so just who you are, and then we want to get right to questions, please. So Manny, let's go ahead and get started with you. Everybody put your questions in the chat, please. Thanks so much.
My name is Manny Abarca IV. I have the privilege of serving in the elected position of Kansas City, Missouri School Board member, representing the 3rd Subdistrict, which includes 2 of the historic Latino communities and a predominantly large immigrant community here in Kansas City, Missouri. I represent about 54 languages in the schools that are spoken here in Kansas City. In addition to that, I have the privilege of working for Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver during my day job. Beyond that, I think that's probably why I'm here. Oh, one important thing. I have one of the 3, I think, total Latinos who are elected here in Kansas City. It is a pleasure, but unfortunately we need to do more to expand that role of representation, both in our city and many cities across the state.
Right. And you are actually, I think, one of 3 Latinos overall, like on a larger position, right? That's elected. So yes, we have one of them coming each day because we had to spread them out. So Robbie Sauls is coming tomorrow, and Ashley is coming on Thursday. Excellent. Denise will go. Guys, I know a lot of you have heard me talk about Denise Lieberman. She is, I really think there's no other way to put it, literally saving democracy in the state of Missouri. Obviously a part of a team, there's a lot of people working on it, but she is the head of a large group of people that is doing tremendous work in terms of saving our voting rights, which are under attack.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you so much for that very gracious introduction. It is so, it's such an honor to be here as part of the Hispanic Leaders Group Lobby Day today. And I'm really excited to have a great conversation with you. My name is Denise Lieberman. I am the Director and General Counsel of the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition, which is a nonpartisan statewide network of advocates who work to protect the right to vote, with a particular focus on communities of color, English plus communities, low-income voters, seniors, voters with disabilities, and other groups that that tend to face disproportionate barriers to the ballot. And I am a voting rights lawyer and have been in the legal space with Ms. Johnson on many occasions, including with election protection and others of you on this call. But I'm hoping today to talk about a couple of things in particular, and I prepared a couple of slides for them that I can show now or show later, but I wanted to speak about 2 things in particular that I wanted to raise with respect to access issues for Latinx voters in particular. The first thing that I would like to talk to you about is a possible project that we are looking to undertake with MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, to expand access to translation services for voters in Missouri, and share with you a little bit about where that's at. And then the second thing I wanted to share with you is in particular one bill that is moving through the Missouri legislature that could have a significant impact on Missouri's Latinx voters. And I can stop here, or I can talk about either of those things when you want me to.
Sure, thanks so much. Well, you know, both of you, if you wouldn't mind, and we can just, because we toggled, just toggled to Denise because we started with Manny. Can you tell us, like, for the Latinos, for the Latinx community, what are those primary issues? Like, you know, the main barrier that you see, is it solely language? Is it ID requirements? Is it, you know, what do you see from a voting perspective? You know, what disenfranchises us the most, and what are the most effective measures that our community leadership can take to ameliorate those problems?
Thank you for that question. It's an important question, and of course, the answer is not maybe as simple as the question might suggest, because of course the Latinx community is not monolithic, and so the barriers that Hispanic voters face are varied. But what I can tell you is this, and what I can tell you is that the problem with voter suppression issues is that it tends to be a death by 1,000 cuts kind of situation, where there are multiple layers of barriers that tend to hit hardest on certain communities. And that is where we see some of these barriers come in. So what, for example, the issue I want to speak to you about language access, well, that may not impact Latinx folks who are fully fluent in English. But obviously we know that America's English Plus community is very, very large. There are some, hang on a second, I actually have data. There's some, what, 25, I want to say million, over 25 million Americans have limited English proficiency. And this creates barriers in all sorts of ways. It creates barriers, as you suggested in your question to the governor, Alex, about just being able to understand voting materials, registration forms, ballot language, even just understanding their rights to vote. Similarly, lack of access to good translation services can exacerbate those barriers. And so while there is a federal law, the Voting Rights Act, that requires some jurisdictions to provide bilingual voting materials in communities with large language minority populations, Missouri is not included in that list. And so there is no right to translation services for Missouri voters. And again, this may not affect Hispanic voters who don't have limited English proficiency, but it certainly does with new Americans, English Plus Americans, recent immigrants, etc. Missouri law does require that people be allowed to have an assistant at the polls. And we think about this a lot with respect to maybe voters that need assistance because they have a physical disability. They may be visually impaired and need someone to help read the ballot to them. But this law applies equally to people that may need help translating the ballot. And this assister can be a family member, it can be a community member. The problem with Missouri's law and the project that I'm hoping to undertake with some of you in this group, the problem with Missouri's law is it says that if I'm assisting you in providing translation services, I can only assist one voter, period, all day long. So that means that groups and organizations that want to assist and provide this assistance, you better have a lot of volunteers, right? And so you can't do, for example, put one volunteer at a polling place to provide assistance in communities that have significant Spanish-speaking populations. You're gonna have to provide a whole team of people. And so you'll hear from Sal Valadez, who chairs the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition's English Plus Committee, who is helping coordinate a meeting with MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, to talk about which we might be able to get that law changed. The second barrier that I'd like to speak to are voter ID laws. And in Missouri right now, you can use any number of forms of identification to vote. All voters do have to show ID to vote, but you can show that card that you get from the election board right before the election. There is a bill that is moving very fast through the Missouri legislature, House Bill 334, that would eliminate all those non-photo forms of ID and require all voters in Missouri to present only the kind of ID that you get at the DMV. A Missouri driver's license or non-driver's license, unless you have a non-expired passport or military ID. The problem with these laws is that a lot of people don't necessarily have a Missouri driver's license, people who don't drive. And of course we know that that the Latinx community tends to be more concentrated in cities and urban areas, may be more likely to use public transportation, may be more likely to be lower income and therefore not have a car, right? And may face other barriers to having a driver's license. But the even more particularized reason that these laws affect Hispanic voters is because American forms don't take Hispanic surnames into account. And so what I have found with many of my clients in challenging photo ID laws is that one agency's form only allows you to put one surname. And so a person will put their maternal surname as a middle name and the paternal surname as a last name, but then a different form will have the maternal and paternal surnames as one last name, and then those two don't match. And if those two don't match, you cannot get a state ID unless you reconcile them. I have had Latinx clients who have had to literally go to court to get a legal name change because the way that it appeared on Social Security had their surname as their middle name and a different name as their last name, but their voter registration had the combined last names. And so those are two things that that definitely impact the Hispanic community, in part because the way that we create forms here is not at all conducive to having the dual surnames. And I'll stop there. I do have some slides about those things, but those are the two barriers that I think are important to know. The final thing that I'll add before I stop is that we do have elections coming up on April 6th. And I want everybody to know that the election protection hotline will be live and available. And this includes a hotline that is answered entirely in Spanish. The election protection hotline, the one that's answered in English, is 866-OUR-VOTE. But there is a partner hotline that is sponsored by MALDEF that is 888-VE-VOTA. And I can show a slide on that later if you'd all like, but that is 888-839-8682. Because we want to make sure that all voters in Missouri, including voters with limited English proficiency in the English Plus community, have access to the right to vote. Everybody has that right. And barriers like language access should not stop people from being able to exercise their voice. And I want to give a special shout out yet again to Sal, who has been just so critical in helping us secure translation services for our voter protection materials to ensure that all voters have access to materials and that they can use and understand to assert their rights.
Yeah, thank you so much. That is great. That's a great presentation and tremendous work. That 866-OUR-VOTE is actually often open. It may be live now, but it's definitely live on the day of the election or in the days preceding an election, the days after an election, to go ahead and help on that. Now, you know, there are other questions coming up, transportation and Wi-Fi access. Denise, I know that you make yourself available over and over. I'm getting messages about time running short, and we do want Manny to have a choice, so we'll transition to him momentarily, but I will tell you a couple of different things. First off, everybody on this group, on this call is a leader. Please drop resources and information for each other into the chat. We'll save this chat and distribute it afterwards to the membership and the participants. I did put in that 866 number. I do know that also Denise, I do want to mention, has a call. It is not just for attorneys, but anybody interested in getting involved with this. Every Monday morning at 10 p.m. I don't know how long that call's been running, years, decades, you know, whatever. Did I say p.m.? a.m. Yes, 10 a.m. on Mondays. They are available. You can call in, sign up, and we can get that information in the chat. Maybe Denise can drop it in there for you to sign up and be more involved. We need leadership involvement to get these 128,000 eligible voters that Sal is talking about voting and informed and so forth. In a nonpartisan way. Manny, I know that you're...
Can I just do one my final little ask though, because I neglected to mention it, is on election day, if you are aware of anybody who is in need of translation services because of this project, we are trying to track that. And so I'm hoping that if you become aware of anybody who does need that assistance, to call us at 866-OUR-VOTE so that we can start documenting the nature and scope of this problem in Missouri. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, that's in the chat, and definitely, and she's dropped the other information too. Manny, transitioning to you, I know that
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Denise. Well, we're not gone yet, like hopefully, you know, but if you have to leave, yes, thank you very much. Manny, I know that you're on now and your position is as treasurer, but I asked you to specifically speak on in terms of empowering the community. How did you get elected? What has your process been? What would you recommend to us? We just had the governor say, get involved, get on these committees. Of course, it's kind of up to him because he's the one that appoints us, right? But to be fair, there are a lot of calls and there aren't a lot necessarily of applications, right? Those spots are, so how do we empower our community more specifically from the political perspective? How do we get them to run and how do you navigate the challenges that might be specific to a Latinx candidate?
Well, let me start by saying this. If you can plan a fiesta, you can run for office. And so I think that's probably the hardest part is encouraging folks to really step up to the plate. And I'll give you a great example. 4.5 years ago, I was contacted by a mentor, someone I would consider a mentor, who said, you should serve on my school board. And this was a charter school, which for those of you who know me, know that I'm adamantly against for a myriad of reasons. And I said, A, I'm not an educator. I don't know enough to run a school system. B, this is something that I don't necessarily morally agree with for a myriad of reasons. And 3, why me? Like, why did you even think to ask me? And so I think a lot of folks within our community often are challenged when brought opportunities to step up and lead in these situations. And so that discussion obviously went towards me joining that school board, learning so much in those 2 years that I spent on the charter school board, and then transitioning to an elected position for the local public school system. And so I think the willingness to just step up to the plate is a lot of it, right? I think in terms of kind of capacity building, which I think is important, is to start identifying folks that you all know or that you all may be as natural leaders, right? Those folks who step in the gaps when folks step aside and don't want to say anything or do anything, and start plugging those folks in with other people who are doing those works, whether they're within the same community or within ally communities. And so I think, I attribute a lot of my political motivation to my boss personally and other folks like him who came before me, whether they were from the Latino community or from other communities. And so I think those are kind of the main things. Definitely apply. I don't think there's a reliance on somebody like the governor to come down and say, hey, I think you right there, you should be on this board. There is certainly some motivation that takes cultivation. And I would encourage this if you're in a leadership position for an organization and a young person who has ambition and potential, put them on the board, right? I mean, I think a lot of the challenge, at least within the Kansas City area, is the same people are serving in so many different capacities that sometimes it gets diluted, but we need to expand our reach and start tapping other folks and investing in young leaders so that the leaders of tomorrow will be prepared for leadership. So I would say those in direct response. If I could quickly go back to the last question too, I think there are 2 other very important things that we need to consider. The census is a major component for redistricting, which designs the boundaries for which represent us, right? And so if I know the last administration had a lot of impact on our community's engagement there, but it is imperative for us to find any means possible to engage in those programs and make sure we are counted so that we can be represented, and not only just involved in the census, but involved in the process of redistricting. That is a gubernatorial appointment as well. For those lines. The other element, and I saw a question asked about community resources to support transportation and what laws may be coming down that can help that. I think it's important for us to realize no matter if we're at a city level, a state level, a federal level, laws are not the only way to solve problems, right? I think we need to think creatively about how can we locally fund transportation to get people from polls to the election box, right? I don't think there are going to be laws, at least in this state, given the current circumstances, that are going to be designed to empower folks and provide public transportation in those ways. I think we need to look at local partnerships with our transportation authorities and maybe community action or organizations that'll help bridge those gaps and not just look towards laws for those. And so I think that's something that I wanted to put out there because I saw that and I was like, ugh, laws take too long sometimes and they are important, and we should fight them. But sometimes it's easier to go find $1,000 and go rent a van and drive people around.
Right, right. That is, you know, you're absolutely right. That kind of grassroots organization, and that, you know, it's interesting that you mentioned being recruited because to run for office, because that actually is what happened to me. Like I said, you know, I want to get involved after the 2016 election. I mean, I was involved before, but I spoke to a different person, and he said, "We need you to run for office. Like that's what we need you to do." And he helped, you know, channel that. And you know, I mean, in politics, people have different agendas and different reasons. You know, not everybody is going to be wanting you to run for the betterment of the Latinx community, but they may have their reasons, you have yours. And, you know, you have to do, you know, politics is messy, right? But Manny, to your point about the skills, you know, if you can plan a party, because I know that one of the things is like, it's just so intimidating, right? You know, you feel like, oh my God, I'm going to file for office. And then you download the form and it's like 2 pages and $96 or something like that. You know, like the filing fees are sometimes really pretty nominal. And it's really, so talk a little bit about the skills that, you know, if we know somebody in our churches, if we know somebody in our neighborhood, and of course, you know, to Denise's point, which is something that is something she knows, given her cultural competence, we know that there's a lot of subdivision, truthfully, in our community, right? Like the Dominicans are over here, the Ecuadorians are over there, the Puerto Ricans are over there, the Mexicans. We all have these great organizations, many of whom put on fantastic festivals, right? That take an enormous amount of coordination, and they've got 500 vendors or whatever. And it's like running for office is literally like applying for a stand at one of the festivals. Like seriously, can you speak to those skills? I mean, really, right? I see you laughing. It's true. We have the skills. Can you speak to that a little bit, Manny? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest challenge to running for office is the willingness to step out, right? Some of it is education once you get there, but you can find folks who have either done this or who are willing to support you and work through it with you, right? And so, yeah, literally, I mean, I think the school board election, this last time is the most challenging time that I had to run because I had to collect 250 signatures within a certain area during a global pandemic, during between Christmas and I think 11 days after New Year's. And so I have this really finite window where I had to find a bunch of registered voters in this crazy environment. But usually that's like the largest hurdle, right? And so when I ran for state representative in 2016, I think it cost me $35, right? And I would have been at that point the lone Latino elected official at the state capitol completely. And like that blows my mind that no one else had stepped up to the plate to run, right? Now, I won't say that the process is going to be easy by any means, right? I mean, for that first race, I had to raise $60,000. That's not $60,000 of my money. That's raising $60,000 organically from the community. But when I ran for the school board the first time, no one ran against me. When I ran the second time, no one's running against me. And so, I mean, in some of these situations, these are going to folks who just step up. And so, I mean, what I would say to you is if you have had any inkling of like, oh, I wish this would change, you have the inkling of, oh, I wish I could change it by serving on a board or running for office, because I think that's a transition that has to happen a lot of time instead of throwing that foam thing at the TV and saying, oh, and then not thinking about it anymore.
Right. And that is so true. Like if, you know, some of these spots are empty. I will submit that, you know, this is an ongoing conversation that I have. Some of you know me on Facebook. I try to organize. We have seen in recent historic events that you can organize an awful lot of political activity on social media. I'm not so ambitious as to want to overthrow our government, but I do want to just organize politically. And we have that connection and that possibility in our community. To Manny's point, you know, finding specific signatures, well, that's something, you know, that again, we can do at our festivals and other connections that we already have in the community, and build on those that you know, maybe in like people that you know that are, you know, all of us or many of us know Hanini Hilberg. We've got Alejandro Santiago Ortega. Lo dije bien, Alejandro Santiago. Santiago Ortega, no? And, you know, from the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, they host events on a regular basis. Granted, now it's pandemic and it's via Zoom, but these are all events that we are all having all the time, where we're all gathering and we're leaders and we're doing this and we're entrepreneurs and businesses and whatever. Those are great opportunities to get the signatures that you need or to get the funding that you need. The grassroots thing, Manny had an expensive campaign. I had a very inexpensive campaign. So there's and I still got over 10,000 votes, which incidentally put me over, you know, I won't even say it here in St. Louis, but an individual who had over $500,000 in his war chest and had been campaigning for over a year, and I campaigned for 8.5 weeks. I filed on the last day that filing was allowed, and had, I think I amassed a grand total of like $14,000 in donations and still came in with over 10,000 votes. So we could say, oh my gosh, Alex, you're a miracle worker, or we could say, I think there's a real opportunity for Latinx leadership in Missouri. That's what I think. I think there's a real space for our voice. We just have to step into that space and so forth. And I would like to raffle a speaking minute to a participant to ask a question directly. Yes, so we are at 4:03. If you do have to leave, the governor was kind enough to stay on a little bit longer with us than his previously planned 20 minutes. If you have to leave, please do so. But we do want to open up time right now to the group. We know that a lot of people have been posting in the chat, but if you have a specific question for Denise or Manny, if you could unmute yourself, please. And if you have not had a chance, please make sure that we give opportunity to participate to those who may not feel comfortable in the chat or have just not had a chance. Do we have a specific question? And I'm sorry, I have no way of telling under my current view. Can you just unmute yourself and speak up?
If somebody wants to ask some questions in the participation button, bottom right, you can raise your hand. Virtually, you can raise your hand. And then what I would do, I'll look and see who raised their hand. I'll close my eyes and I'll point to one.
Yeah.
That's a raffle type. So let me go to gallery view. Okay, gallery view. I don't see anybody raising their virtual hands. Let me go to the next screen.
We've got so many screens.
Yeah, let me go to you guys. You see how on mine, I got my hand up?
But it's okay. You can just unmute yourself.
Kevin Reyes, go ahead, Kevin.
Hi, everyone. I had a question for Denise. What is the best way for us to get involved with, I guess, you mentioned there was a law that was being passed through the Missouri legislature, and I think that's kind of a common practice, or that's something that I think several states are going through right now following the last presidential election. So what can we do to help out, I guess, and to help our community out, to, I don't know, support our community in that front?
Thank you so much for that question. It's a great question. And you're right, there are over 300 restrictive voting bills pending in 43 states right now. This is the period that we are in right now is actually seeing some of the largest legislative activity to restrict the right to vote since Reconstruction, since the post-Reconstruction era. So it really is a lot. Here in Missouri, we really do focus this time of year on the Missouri legislative work. And our weekly calls on Monday mornings have been significantly focused on updates from the legislature. We often are joined by legislators from the Capitol, as well as people who are under the dome lobbying there about exactly where things are at. We do send things out as well over our listserv when something is moving. and we'll provide a link to how, basically we'll do a call to action. So like today, we knew that some of the petitioning bills were likely to be up this afternoon. I sent an action alert, and the call to action was to make one phone call. And we provided the information on how to do that. Where it's maybe testimony, we'll provide a link where how you can speak up, etc. So I would encourage people to sign up for that newsletter because we get that information out right away. One thing that I think would be valuable, particularly because these laws do impact disparate communities, it would be great to develop a particularized set of talking points for Latinx communities about perhaps the ways that some of these bills stand to impact voting for Missouri's English Plus voters, as well as Missouri's Hispanic voters.
Excellent. Yeah.
And we'd be happy to work on that.
Yeah, Jeff Soyantet is also on the call, and so he is involved with the local African immigrant community and might be a great resource there to have some additional insights that we could include or help amplify those messages. I see that Maria had raised her hand, and then I'd like to go to Hades' great question about Latinx teachers, may also be directed more towards Manny, but Maria, what is your question?
Thank you, everybody, and thank you all for being our guests here. I don't have a question, but I do have an appeal to you, Manny, considering where you are. I'm no longer a teacher, but I was teacher for many, many years, and one of the things that really upset me and I couldn't do anything about is fighting with the system is that students that are immigrants and of course are Latinos, that was where I saw quite a bit, is that they don't take them seriously when they have special needs. They push them down the line. And I had a child that had a speech impediment in kindergarten. I put all the papers, everything down, and she did not get services until she was in 3rd grade. Same thing happened to another student that did not get services till 4th grade. Again, another Hispanic. And many of them, and it's not just the Hispanics, though, I have to say, when it comes to children that do not speak the English, they allude that to having a second language, and they demote the fact that they're learning 2 languages, and they have excuses to pass the service for another year and the next year. And you and I know that the sooner they get the services, the easier it's going to be for that child, and the less cost really for the school district, but never has been recognized to that during the many years that I was in education, and it was very frustrating. So I would appeal to you to please have that in there and see what you can do to really protect our immigrant children for those special services.
If I could just quickly, I know there's going to be another question about Ed. That is an issue that is consistent across multiple districts. I had a good friend in a suburb here in Kansas City who was an ELL or is an ELL instructor, I guess, and discussed all the time the challenges with making sure that ELL students were getting the same consideration for additional services that others were getting consideration for. And so I hear that, and those are questions that I most certainly asked from the dais, but it sounds like it's something that's probably going to have to rise. I know I said this before, back to the legal side and creating an opportunity for a new law to be created or a new system designed by DESE to ensure that there's equity there.
Thank you, Manny.
Excellent, excellent. And Haiti, did you want to make your point to Manny?
Well, yes, I wanted to follow up also in the topic of education. I teach Spanish here in St. Louis. And one of my concerns, because I'm working right now on my dissertation too, is also how we can support Latino teachers. It's not very easy, because we need to navigate different spaces and we bring our culture. And sometimes our culture could be understood in a different way. So one of my questions is, how can we receive support, for example, and to create that pipeline, right? If we have students, Hispanic students, we can continue in the teaching field. How we can do that? What happened with when they're in college, right? When they're in the process of getting the certification, how hard is that? Or how we can create those supports for them if they have questions in the process, so they don't feel like, oh my God, I'm not doing it, I cannot follow it, because they need that support. And also, when the teachers are in the field, we know that those first to fifth year, they are necessary to have that support. If I'm very thankful because I have a great mentor during my first years, but sometimes not many teachers have it, and it's just totally different, like being in the field and having that feeling of invisibility, or that you cannot do things just because all these spaces that you need to navigate, because there are several ones, and I know you have experienced that too, and your different fields. So it's just very important. I wanted to share. We're having a big number of teachers who are retiring or are not returning to the profession, and it was increased with the pandemic. So, but my concern is how we can support Latino teachers, how we can provide them the help they need and answer their questions if they have any. So
yeah,
thank
so
you.
that's a big box of a lot of questions, very important ones. And I'm not gonna by any means suggest that these are the best solutions, but these are solutions that our district has put in place and our community has put in place. So the first one, in terms of, let me take it back to recruitment of Latino educators, because I think that's another component. And so KCPS has made a commitment to talk to recruiters in areas where there are large Latino populations, right? So we're talking about going to Texas, going to Puerto Rico, going to New York, going to these places and engaging the communities where they are and trying to recruit them back here. And so those are steps and strategies that districts can take. But I'll go a step further that may answer some of the next one. It requires the district and the board to acknowledge the need for these equity policies, right? And so KCPS acknowledged before I even joined the board that equity was so fundamental for every policy within our book. They went back and said equity policy is 0.0. It is at the beginning of every single policy that exists and fundamentally has to be within the scope of every policy as it's interpreted. And so because of that and that forefront positioning for that policy, we then can start breaking down some of the other support systems that are needed to support teachers of color, because I think some of these are very paired with our Black brothers and sisters as well when it comes to their support. And so in the equity component, community engagement is critical here, right? Because it can't just be a single teacher advocating for this. It has to be a robust community discussion that drives the motivation for the board to adopt and go after these policies. And so I think that is where the groundswell has to come. So as this group of community leaders, I think it has to be part of that discussion. In Kansas City, we have been successful at including Latino and African-American centered educational components into our curriculum, both on the Kansas City, Missouri and the Kansas City, Kansas side. And that was adopted within the last academic year through all this dynamic pandemic issues, right? In addition to that, as we talked about kind of the pipeline and support systems, it was through community efforts that a small group of Latino leaders stepped up and said, I'm going to go work with one of our local universities and create a scholarship focused on Latino students and bringing them to campus and then cultivating and providing them with educational opportunities. So that's not specific to education, but what that did was create an opportunity then for me as a member of that scholarship board to ask the same university to create a graduate level program, because the need for certified master's and doctorate level Latinos was so critical that we needed to create some level of pipeline directly with institutions. And that came from community action, right? That's separate from everything else. And so I think those things are possible and within the grasp of this group. I think when it comes to teacher supports, right, within those first, I think I've been told 3 years from our district that are critical years. There's a lot of things that add there, right? I mean, compensation is one of those things, benefits is one of those things, and then direct support from the folks within the academic side of the institutions. And that's leadership within your district, right? And so if that's not there, you know, again, that falls back to the board and their accountability to ensure that the superintendent and their employees within the cabinet are holding folks accountable to make sure that the supports are in place to make sure teachers like you don't leave.
Also the social emotional piece, which is so important.
Right.
Thank you very much, Manny.
You know, that's a huge issue that Hades brought up here, Manny, and so many groups, so much effort is white led, right? And you know, you have folks that have the cultural competence to navigate a multicultural group, but you often don't. And so, as I know that as an attorney, I do estate planning, and I did not realize, I went into it because my mom has Alzheimer's, and her life and all of our family's lives would have been radically different if we hadn't had her paperwork in place. But thanks to that, I realized, oh my gosh, the enormous impact that estate planning has and having these powers of attorney. So that's why I went into it. But now that I'm in it, because it deals with a lot of wealth, of course, estate planning, it is a terribly white male dominated space. And so, you know, you have that, and my name's Alexandra Johnson. My hair, you can see it's not that pretty Latina hair. I have, like, you know, and I don't have an accent and so forth. And I still experience a discrimination, which is not surprising. So you can imagine someone who may have other beautiful features that identify them even more ethnically in some ways, that they have so many challenges. So the challenges that public school teachers have in general, and also if you're African American, also if you're Latina, also if you have these other areas of intersectionality, and it's just such a terrible problem, you know, because you're doing all of the struggles that are inherent in a poorly funded and poorly structured public school system, and adding that component of sometimes very real discrimination. And we have to have internal conversations, right? Latinos can be discriminatory against Blacks. Latinos can be, you know, there's colorism issues within the Latinx community, right? Like if you're lighter skinned, that you discriminate against a darker skin. And that's actually proven. Like judges will sometimes, Latinx judges will sometimes sentence darker skinned Hispanics more harshly. So the colorism issues within all the communities, right? That these are, you know, it can go in all different ways, right? The conversation and that accountability is important. But in terms of systemically, I just hate to hear what Haiti's telling us. You know, you've got committed, dedicated, qualified people leaving because there's just not that cultural competence in addition to everything else. So that's just so tremendous. We have a lot of stuff going on in the chat. Please recall that call to action. We promised the governor, we're going to close out. We promised the governor, he said, send it to me. And I am not kidding you. Let's give ourselves, it is March 23rd. Let's look at 90 days and we will put it in there. No more than 5 pages. I'm going to set a limit. No more than 5 pages on your section. Denise, I want your stuff in there. I know that you come around, but what the heck? We've got a pipeline now to the governor. We will put voting rights in there. We'll put education in there. We'll put vaccine, Title VI. Yvonne, you know, your great health perspective being affiliated with Affinia. Let's put, you know, LGBTQI+. Let's put it in there, black and white. These are the issues confronting our community. And you keep saying, you know, all of this. I think we have to start with that education component of equity versus equality. Let's put that at the top of the document. And this informs everything that we're about to tell you. Have like a cover sheet. I'm not kidding. This is what all of us do in our different areas. It's a call to action, 90 days. Let's get that going and get this in front of the governor. We are going to close out with an invitation to come. I see that there's calls for this to not, Manny, let's not do it just once a year. We do meet regularly. Now that it's Zoom, you can join us, Manny. We'll add you, Mauricio, we'll add you to our distribution list. Please come tomorrow and the day after. We do have other great panelists wanting, of course, to close out with Manny and Denise. Thank you so much for your participation. Everyone's done a great job. Really appreciated your questions. We had moments with the governor, but we got that direct access. I mean, that's something that this group offers. You know, he heard it. See Sal is raising his finger.
Yes, Sal, please.
Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say how exciting it is. We've been talking about collaborating across the state. And I'm so happy to have gotten to know Manny on other things. And I want to congratulate Kansas City. You guys are, I mean, between the Latinx Education Collaborative, Juan Rangel, Alex Palacios, Dr. Julia, I forget her name. I've got a gap.
Vargas.
No, yes, Dr. Julia Vargas. I mean, you all, if we can collaborate across the state from Kansas City down to Branson and Cape Girardeau, and you saw the eligible voters, we can make a difference in many ways. So I'm just really excited to see so many people from all over the state, from our Latinx communities. Young Kevin Reyes, the president of the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, other folks. This has been great. This has been a great first day. And thank you, Manny. Thank you, Denise, and everybody else. Alex.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. I just wanted to say something that I learned in a leadership course. When we're on Zoom, we want to acknowledge everybody that spoke and everybody that's on the Zoom by going like that, you know, jazz hands. Just this is how we clap. Everybody go like that for everybody else. We love you all. Thank you all for being here. And I want you to know that out of, I think I counted like 34 people, we're still 26. And we're way beyond an hour. So congratulations for that integrity, for that leadership that you guys have, for that interest and that passion for our community. And I want to invite you to join us again tomorrow at 3 o'clock, the same Zoom link. You don't have to wait for a Zoom link, the same Zoom link. And then join us again when we get the legislators on Thursday. We're going to have the state representatives and a senator there. So join us again. Let's keep our integrity and our passion for our community. Again, from the bottom of my heart, I really love my community, and this is why, because you guys are doing it. You guys have integrity, and thank you so much. I'm going to go change some Pampers, all right? See you later.
Yes, Tony, in addition to everything else, helps take care of his mother-in-law. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye. Bye.
It was very nice to see you.
I would encourage everybody to unmute themselves and say goodbye.
Adiós, amigos. Los extrañé.
Adiós, todo el mundo. Los quiero mucho.
Muchas gracias. Nos vemos.
Adiositos. Heidi, thank you. Italia, thank you. Alejandra, thank you. Elena. María Olivos, gracias. Cristi Sánchez, María Rosario, María Teresa Maldonado, gracias. Mauricio, gracias. Susan Gobo, gracias. I hope I didn't miss anybody. Love you all. Bye.
We're going to stay over here just with Mario Lives. Can you hear me, Sal? Let's just finish. Let's just remove the other people from the call. Just a second. We're getting there. Okay, we're almost there. I think Tony left.
Yeah.
Oh. Darn it. And I told him, I see Maria Teresa is still there. Let me just ping Tony, because I pinged him. And let me just do something over here. I pinged him telling him, stay there. We're going to talk to Maria. He just left. Just a second. So, Alex, While we're waiting, this is, I want to introduce you Maria Olivos. She's the one that I talked to you about. She's willing to help us initially with Zoom, but
I think she froze.
Oh.
She left. She probably will rejoin.
Okay, let me call Tony over here just a second. Oh, darn. Let's see what's going on. You're still there, right?
I'm here.
Your call has been forwarded to an audio.
Why these people just drop off?
Do you want, Mauricio, do you want to stop the recording?
Yes, let's do that. Oh, good advice. Let me do this. Where is this? I'm looking for the. I'm still not a native Zoom. Oh, there we go. Let me stop the recording over here. Okay.